Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kara Salazar. I am an assistant program leader and extension specialist for Sustainable Communities with Purdue Extension and the host conference team. I'm very pleased to introduce our keynote speakers for our first session, Town Squares Can Be Anywhere, Connecting Community and Public Places. Joining us today are Jim Walker and Shauta Marsh of Big Car Collaborative, an Indianapolis-based nonprofit art and placemaking organization. They will lead us through an interactive session focusing on the role of active, engaging, welcoming, and art-filled public spaces in supporting inclusive and sustainable community building and community development. Thank you both for being with us today and sharing your inspirational work. I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, and thank you all for having us and being here today. And we're real excited to talk to you and meet you all, I hope. We'll try, at least.
Okay, good. That worked. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jim Walker, this is Shauta Marsh, and we are going to be really close here. We're married to each other, so it's okay. We started this organization, Big Car Collaborative, in 2004. We've been doing a lot of this work very close to this building, including some work that Shauta did in this building. We started in Fountain Square, just down the way. How many people have been to Fountain Square so far? So there's one thing about this PowerPoint keynote thing is really long, but we're going to share it with you so you'll be able to get it later, so you don't have to worry about keeping notes. But feel free to do that and take pictures, whatever else you want to do. So you've all been to town squares and to places that you thought were really great. There are all kinds of people there, all kinds of things happening. What we're going to talk about is mostly places where that's not the case currently, and how we can change that to make it a town square anywhere.
And I'm sure all of you have dealt with the construction happening all over the city right now. So we thought we'd start with an example outside of our space.
So this is about to happen again. Where we're located on the south side, the road is being closed. They've been doing a lot of work. So what we looked at is one of the things that we don't want to see is roadblocks. We want to see opportunities and ways that we can work with it. So when we showed up and the access to where we're based was blocked, we decided to turn that into a public place and a town square. So where you had the street blocked, you had businesses kind of separated from traffic, we were able to bring people to that place and get things happening there. Just even using the backdrop of the road closed barrier for where the band played, and then just having adjacent spaces for people to sit. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is just basically how you can work with what you have, but bring a lot of different things together to make these places into what a town square would normally be like.
And we did talk to a lot of the businesses too before, like setting up. We were like, "Is this okay?" You know, and then trying to connect what they were upset about the road closures too. So trying to bring more business to them. They were interested in that.
So we're just going to breeze through a bunch of stuff to give you some context and some history. So we started in 2004. The woman in the red down there dancing is Shauta. one of the places that we learned a lot was in Fountain Square. So if you've ever heard of this band called Harry and the Potters, they dress up like Harry Potter characters and play kind of like punk music. So we had a plan for them to be in our little gallery, this place, and then we thought that would work, but then so many people wanted to go to this concert that we moved it out to a parking lot outside our building. And so when we were there, we thought, okay, this is something we can do with this space. And so over time, that space was built out into the plaza that you'll see in the center of Fountain Square. It's currently not that lively of a place still because it's lacking some of the ingredients that we'll talk about today. We had to move out of that space in 2008. Fountain Square commercially and then residentially gentrified really quickly. That was the neighborhood where we lived together with our family. So you can see as you look at how much it changed, a lot of what was responsible for the change was just logic. It's close to downtown, the cultural trail connected it to the rest of the city, and it just shouldn't be sitting there empty.
Yeah, there were also a lot of locally owned restaurants, so people wanted to come there and experience it. A lot of other arts galleries, music shows, so all that was drawing their people's attention and changing the neighborhood, and the real estate ended up going up around 400% in around 2 years. Yeah.
So we moved out of that neighborhood and we moved into the second kind of town square we're going to talk about. We did a project that engaged a lot of different neighbors, and they were mainly people who worked in businesses at Lafayette Square, which is out on the west side of town. So this one is about how you can adapt a commercial space, a suburban commercial space that's vacant, in our case, and turn it into a town square. So this was what we walked into. We saw this place. It had a lot to offer, but it had a lot of drawbacks. So a lot of empty parking, a lot of problems. So we wanted to see how we could take that front lot and turn it into a place where people could have fun and hang out. So we started doing a lot of research, made a lot of plans. We put the word out to tree services that we would take mulch. They brought us way too much mulch. It was a stormy spring, and they just kept on, they didn't want to take it back to wherever they needed to take it back to, so they were happy to drop it off for us for our garden. So we worked and worked, and we ended up with this massive garden out in front of the building. It turned into a park where we grew all kinds of things, enormous sweet potatoes that we ended
like this.
We ended up, go ahead.
Yeah, and also just a difference between these spaces is that, we moved, like as an organization, we did more arts, the gallery had more typical art events, like more gallery shows, more music shows, because it was a white box space that was maybe around 1,000 square feet. This space moved to being more events oriented. So this was a destination. There were not people living around Lafayette Square in this.
They live nearby, but they don't
nearby.
live by the mall.
So you could walk to, and Fountain Square, it's walkable to the Murphy Arts Center where we were first located. This was not a real walkable place.
And it's also an international area. Lots of international businesses and a lot of immigrants had moved to that part of town. And so we really embraced and worked with partners who were from all kinds of different backgrounds. So one thing that we discovered is that we were doing a thing called placemaking. We didn't really know a lot about it, so we're talking about 2010. So we found this book by Holly White that is through PPS. If you're not familiar with PPS, it's something to check into. And we looked at these things that this list, and we noticed that all of these things were happening. Sociability, access, we did work on access. There was a bus stop in front of our building, but it was just a sign. So we figured out how to put a bench there, how to have it be more comfortable, how to have wayfinding for people to get in. We added supported ways for people to bike there. We also just made it comfortable and made it feel like a place you wanted to be. And like Shauta said, we had a lot more events that brought groups, so people would see other people and then they would come there. We had things that appealed to different ages. We had all kinds of different activities that we offered. We're gonna come back to this power of 10 plus in a minute. This is basically having 10 options for things to do. So maybe you're gonna go visit the chickens, you're gonna sit on a bench and read a book, you're gonna listen to some music, you're going to have a conversation. In this was a meeting about herbs that you could grow in the garden. So basically, we figured out that we were doing placemaking, but sometimes the word gets a little confusing to people. What it really is about making a place for people and not just making a place, and making a place where people feel happy. So it's really more about happy making and about all the things that make people feel welcome and involved and included and love the place that they're at and connect with each other than it is about the place only.
Yeah, and we really are big on doing with and not for. So when we are working in these different neighborhoods, we go to the neighborhood association. We go to this in Lafayette Square. We worked a lot with the business association and talk to them and say, what is it that how can we work with you? You know, we want to build on what people are already doing, because in every neighborhood, everywhere, people are already doing great work. So it's like finding who those people are and helping them and building on that.
So something else we figured out around that time was there's a thing called tactical urbanism that if you don't know about it, I think a lot of you probably do by now. It's just this idea of short-term action for long-term change. So you go, you try some of these things out, you see what you can do that makes a long-term change. So we really, where you look at this diagram, we came along at the time when we had Twitter when it first opened, we had Facebook, we had YouTube, and so we have the internet to support and help us promote things. So we didn't need a marketing budget, we didn't have any money for any of that, but we had this way of reaching people and getting people going. And we also were in the middle of, we started, if you remember what 2008 was like, it was the recession. So we had a lot of opportunity to utilize vacant spaces, and we were also doing things that were part of strengthening economic development in communities that needed support. So there were a lot of things that came together for us. So the place that we applied our tactical urbanism practice and placemaking practice that we had started out at Lafayette Square, that was a very visible place, was a town square in this town that should already have been really active, but it really was not as active as it should be. And it's currently not super active now, even though we're about to start working there. And I'm talking about Monument Circle. So we've all been to Monument Circle. How many people have been to it, know about it? Okay, so we got a National Endowment for the Arts grant with the city of Indianapolis and some other support. And so we decided to look at what we could do, and this was to activate this space. Many of you work with government officials, I'm sure. We were at the tail end of our mayor's administration. So all the people who were supposed to work with us on this project and had applied for the grant started to quit and get other jobs because they were just on their way out. So it's basically, there was a moment where we were like, oh, okay, that's not that great. Then we were like, hey, wait a minute, that's really great. No one's paying any attention to what we're doing. So we could do whatever we want, and so we did, but we still met the goals, and we had lots of brainstorms. One of the activities that's out in the hall for you to do is to think about Monument Circle. So if you've been there, you want to, and this sheet that we use to draw ideas on and have conversations with people is out there, so you can add your own ideas. Because we are starting this back up. It was supposed to actually start today, but it got delayed a week.
Yeah, also this, it's an important space because it was initially the heart of the city. So at one point, there were no buildings that were allowed to be any taller than Monument Circle. And when people visit here, and they stay in the hotels, a lot of times they end up on foot there. A lot of the streets lead to Monument Circle. So it's almost like even if you didn't intentionally, if you set out walking in the city, you'd probably end up there because things lead there.
So I'm going to kind of breeze through a little bit. So you can see you can count all the things that are happening right there in this space. One of the key things is that on the circle is that we had this welcome trailer where anybody could walk up and ask questions. It was open pretty much all day long and all weekend long. I'm not going to read all this stuff, but we brainstormed a lot of things, and this is what we presented to the stakeholders and to the businesses and to the neighbors around the circle. We tried to take this big thing, this was 7 days a week, and divide it into sections, which is a way that we could kind of tackle that. We also had lots of brainstorms and lots of ideas that were site-specific and community-specific to the circle. There's a general Goodwin, an actual general who is in charge of the monument and the inside of it. Then the state is involved, and then the city is involved. So you had to navigate all these different levels of bureaucracy and hierarchy and command, chain of command, to get things done. But one of the things we did was we really focused on the site and its history and connected with that. So one example of an activity that we did, there are these statues around of different people, historic figures. No one really knew who hardly any of them were. They're kind of obscure. Some of them aren't as obscure, but maybe an old governor. So we had people dress as them, learn about them, and then walk around like a living history museum and just talk to people just on the street. So that was one example. And the general loved that. So some other examples, these are activities where artists can come. This is as you wish. You come up and you make a wish, and people make these wishes for you out of this small thing. So there's stuff around, there's art supplies.
We always ran out of world peace. Sorry.
This is a project Shauta liked to do. This is one of our artists in our organization, Eduardo. This was an idea.
Listening booth, yeah. Basically, when we were there, people wanted to connect to other people. They wanted to talk to other people. So the listening booth was basically all you did was sit and listen to people. But you don't give advice. People want advice. Do not give advice. You don't want to be on the hook for that.
So the little desk that was the listening booth, the As You Wish, could also be this. This was called Forensic Friends. It's kind of like getting a forensic sketch for like somebody to describe a criminal. But in this case, it's about a friend, a person that you wanted to think about. And so you just would describe that friend. You couldn't look at your phone. You had to, and then it made you remember what they look like, and it made you talk to this artist and describe them. So it's all this ways of engagement where the artist is connected with the person. And then, like in this picture, you can see the man on the bottom right. His family member had that drawing, and then you can present it to the person, and it actually turns out really nice. We love coloring, so you'll see another activity out here is our postcard project. So we make the postcards black and white, then you can color them on the outside, and then you can write an address and a little note and put it in the mail. A lot of people are like, I don't know any addresses. And we're like, just call your grandma. She'll tell you her address. So we mailed thousands, and we continue to do this project of postcards all over the world. So it's something that we do all the time in all of our projects, and we make postcards that are site-specific. So we had a bunch of historic postcards for the circle, but wherever we do a project, we make a postcard that is about that place. So you'll see some about Garfield Park, where we're based out of. You'll see, and we do leave color ones because sometimes people don't want to color, they just want to write a note. That's totally fine. So we also had a lot of people down on the circle come up with their own ideas. This was a group from the church on the circle that had a wine and knitting club. So they would just go down and sit out and knit and drink wine, and they brought their own wine. It was really awesome. And the one on the left was the world's largest, we called it the world's largest collage. We didn't really ever verify that with Guinness or anybody. The other thing that we used the space for was gathering input. So just having these things out.
And that was based on the work of Candy Chang. So one thing we always try to do is that when we get ideas from other artists that are doing this work, we try to always credit them. So we credit Candy Chang for that.
So the other objective for people in the room who are planners or urban designers or landscape architects was to test out a new model for the circle that would reduce the driving area and increase the pedestrian zone. So where you see the tables up on the left, the green, those were in what would normally be parking, and then we put the cars out into the other zone. So you can see that it kind of shifts into this.
I don't think
it's going over there.
Okay.
So it shifts into this place where there are people out there are horses, and the games. One thing about this is that it's okay to slow people down by tightening an area up. So it's when something is too easy to drive through or walk through, you don't slow down because you don't have any reason to. So we made this place where you had to come next to something, and then you looked at it and you slowed yourself down. Now,
While still keeping it accessible.
right. So the 10 plus things to do, this is the thing we mentioned that PPS has talked about. You see these little colored circles, that's where there's all these different activities. So if you think about a spot, then you can do that.
Do we have audio? I don't think we have audio.
So you can see it, that's fine. So you can see on the video, this is showing you some our kind of the images of the circle and the activations. Lots of things going on.
Yeah, and this was 12 weeks of daily programming that we did 7 days a week. So from I think I'd get in at 7 a.m. to set up, and then until, depended on if we had events, but sometimes until 10 or 11 p.m.
So a lot of 12-hour days. It was a pretty intense period of time, but we tested out all kinds of things. Really liked the games, interaction. A lot of it was about people being in close proximity with each other and just being in this space together. We had a lot of people doing things like playing pickup chess, and you might have a business person who just got off work playing chess with somebody who's maybe a homeless person who's just down on the circle. So you had a lot of this bringing together of people of very different backgrounds and how connected you could be with each other. We also did a lot of things that involved music and artists and supporting artists, because it was an NEA grant, and a lot of the funding went directly to paying artists for their work.
And we had a ton of partner organizations like the YMCA. We couldn't do all this programming ourselves. Now, we did hire the artists, and I think we had at a show. I think we paid over 300 artists.
We'll get to it. So the other thing we had to do during this was learn a lot about data tracking and evaluation, because we had a lot of reporting to do the NEA, and we also had the whole idea of this was to test a big project to see how things could work on the circle. So we counted visitors, we counted programming, we tracked how many artists we paid, how much of the money went to art. 90% of the $400,000 went to artists and arts organizations. We brought in $200,000 worth of outside money from the NEA to our city. We also talked to the businesses around the circle and kept track of their sales during the program. So they reported a 20% increase in the volume of sales while this was happening. We also tracked the amount of time people spent at the circle through talking with people and tracking their visits. So 85% of people were spending more time at the circle. We also, then this was a very important one for us, how many people were having a conversation with somebody new. And that's 85% of the visitors were having a conversation with somebody they didn't know when they were in this public space. We also, directly linked to that, we tripled the amount of seating that was out there. So we had places to sit, that kept people around, and then we also asked people what they were attracted to, what drew them to the circle, and the number one answer was always that there were other people there. So the place that has people draws people. Back to the postcard project, we sent out 3,000 postcards during this, and we tracked them. One thing that's nice about postcards for people who love data tracking, how many people love data tracking in the room? You can see the zip code, and you can see where it's going because it's there. So we just used
tracked the zip codes only
on our spreadsheets. Yeah. So we had all of the zip codes for where everything was going, so we knew where everybody was sending their things. Okay, so on to a couple more. Parking lot, again, can be a place to do a town square. So Indiana State Fair is a great place to go. They asked us to do some placemaking there. They had this parking lot. It didn't look like much when we saw it, but it became this lively center for activity at the fair. And it was just this spot for people to play and have all these games and all this stuff going. One of the things that was really popular was in the top right, a little soccer goal, and we used straw bales around the edge so people could play. And it was cool because a lot of the farm kids would come in their cowboy boots, and there'd be a row of cowboy boots over on the straw bale because they would take them off to play in the hay bales. So everybody's town, everybody's city has these entry plazas A lot of them were built in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. They're really bleak. They don't have a lot of life to them. They look like this. This is over at Indianapolis City Market, which is very close to here, another place you should visit while you're in town. It was just this modernist plaza, and we got a grant from, this time, working directly with Project for Public Spaces and Southwest Airlines and City Market. We got a grant to change this. So what you see in the foreground here was an old fountain that had been broken from like maybe the second day that it was in operation. And it was it would still fill with water, and it was nasty. So we made a rain garden out of that, working with a landscape architecture company. We put bocce court out there. We took these poles, these bollards, or red bollards, and we built stand-up bars around them for people. The Wagon of Wonders, which is our mobile art museum, was out. We also commissioned an artist, Bruce Partington, to build this. What you see people hanging around here is a mobile parklet that can move around. So basically, it became this little oasis in the middle of the city that had been totally overlooked and just left to go.
Yeah, and one thing that's really important is just having free activities that bring people together. You know, when you go to the fair, it's already real expensive to get in, and then everything costs more money. But it was nice, I think, for a lot of families, the feedback that we got, that there was something for their kids to do, that they could hang out longer. And then also with even being downtown, we were by, there were actually a lot of families that were there too, because it was by the city-county building. So it was they'd come out of the building and they could hang out and play, color. It was, people really appreciated that.
The key thing with materials like ping pong paddles, ping pong balls, chess, checkers, that little stuff is to just don't worry about it. If it walks off, if it gets broken, if it gets lost, even with chairs and tables, the bistro chairs and tables, if people feel like everything's all locked up and locked down and you have to check it out, they're disrespected and they aren't trusted. And so things walked off, things have disappeared, but we didn't worry about it because we just bought a ton of plastic ping pong paddles, and they don't get damaged in the weather. And if people walk off with a ping pong paddle, okay, that's fine. So we'll just put another one out. A couple more. This one has parks as town squares. So public parks are amazing for these things to happen in. This is a festival called the Feast of Lanterns that's at Spades Park here in Indianapolis, and so you can kind of see the Wagon of Wonders. It's built on an ice fishing. Anybody from Minnesota in the room? So you know you have ice fishing trailers up there, right? They are on hydraulics and they lower down to the lake so that the wind doesn't come underneath you, and you can open it up, and it's a box. So this box that you see in Minnesota and Canada and places where the ice is still holding on, you can open the bottom up and you basically have a man cave or a person cave that you can hang out in and fish, and it's warm, and they have, their beer and stuff in there. So the trailer works perfectly for this because it lowers down and it's not elevated, and people can get into it, and it doesn't even look like a trailer anymore. And so this is kind of how it looks when we set up in a park.
And all the exhibits on there I put together, they're very much related to Indiana and their place-based. So it's thinking about how can people interact with stories about the place that they are and the state that they're living, So there's one of my favorites is the Indiana Cultural Movers and Shakers exhibit, and basically I commissioned from an artist these oil portraits that people could pull off, read about them on the back, about who they were and how they shaped the state or even the nation, or how they changed the world, and they're from Indiana or they're from Indianapolis. So, and people want to be able to touch art. Go ahead.
So this picture is a really good one because of Eduardo's position in this, and he's leaning forward to the people who are out there. He's not sitting down. So, how you greet people, being there with them, and coming to them when they're there is really important. This is the Wagon of Wonders at Turkey Run State Park here in Indiana. we converted it to a puppet show. So this is a Shauta had commissioned.
Jenny Olakainen, and this is based off of the town of New Harmony. So we've been researching utopia and dystopia and how you can't create a utopia without creating a dystopia for someone. So like the balance of that. So New Harmony became really important, and a lot of those creatures were commissioned based off of that research and the town of New Harmony.
So we're going to give you a little bit of listy stuff here, and then we're going to breeze through a couple more things, and then we're going to do your participation thing, which is in the middle of your table. So just the highlights of some of these things on the list. This needs to feel like it's something that matters to you. It needs to matter to you and to the people who are doing this. So that's part of the reason that engaging artists is really important, because it can be part of their art practice to do this work in these spaces. We talked about most of these other things. Triangulation is a key to a lot of this, is having this stuff happen in a place where it flows and connects with other things that are going on. It's difficult to bring it together in a place where there's not anything else happening. Having it be fun and playful and just kind of tracking your work. This is our chart that kind of shows our process. So it's always this circle that goes around from engagement through testing to trying these things out to celebrating to tracking our data and evaluating and working back to it. So where we are now is our own neighborhood as a town square. We started off doing this mural with the neighbors. If you haven't looked at another thing that's called Better Block, it's a really good approach to taking vacant spaces. So we did a Better Block 2 times in our neighborhood. We are working on how to undo the damage of I-65 that comes through our neighborhood. So the big building that you see that is that black box on the bottom down there, that's where we're based. So you can see here, this is sort of the zone of our work. This is our block. This is our neighborhood looking towards downtown.
And when we first started working this neighborhood on that street, which dead ends into the interstate, of the 20 houses, 10 of them were vacant and abandoned.
And there was this vacant factory campus there. Yeah. So that's where the tube factory is now. So in that place, all these kinds of things happen. We work with all kinds of different entities and programs. So this is the Mutual UFO Network. And we had presentations with them. We've had presentations with people interested in Bigfoot. It's very fun to bring all kinds of different people together of all ages into the space, and including a lot of the very high level contemporary art that we bring into the space as a museum.
Yeah. So I commission works from artists based on the themes of community, memory, and mythology. The shows take around 2 to 3 years. Currently, Eduardo and I have co-curated an exhibit that's up right now, Eduardo Luna, and I've worked with him for 10 years and just really fun to work with. The other thing is you might ask is like, why art? Why use arts as a tool to bring people together? Well, people are more open to art than each other. It is a lot of times a non-intimidating way to connect to each other. It really, most of the time, shouldn't be an issue if you're standing next to a stranger and one of you loves something and the other of you hates it. It's a great starting point for conversation. Now, there are issues where a lot of people think contemporary art is for the elite. So they aren't comfortable in white box spaces. They aren't comfortable in museums. They aren't comfortable in galleries. So that's why placemaking is really important tool, because they are interested in coloring. They are interested a lot of times in ping pong and talking to each other. So these are all...
And night markets.
And like with local artisans. So I don't value a high art world artist more than someone who is selling, soap they might have made themselves as a vendor. Those are all artists are important, and we want to show value and demonstrate that with everything we do as an organization, because we believe in the power of art to bring people together and try to heal.
Okay, so these are some go back to that list that you saw before from PPS. This is our version of that. So basically we focus on active, engaging, creative, inviting, comfortable, inclusive, and accessible spaces that are easy to find, that feel safe and are safe, and that are respectful to everyone. Last thing we're going to say, and there's a mobile workshop to our space tomorrow afternoon. You can come down and learn more. One of the big projects that we're working on right now is affordable housing for artists. So we have 16 houses around our building. We knew that when we moved in there that we would be creating more demand for living in the neighborhood, and so we were able to get those vacant houses with some partners and secure those to be long-term affordable. So the artists can get those for half off of market, either as a rent or purchase. So that's currently where we are on this.
It's a community land trust model.
So last thing, before we do our activity, there's a study by Donald Appleyard that is talking about slow, fast, medium streets. So this is this is a chart of relationships between people who live on a block in San Francisco back in the 80s. When you look at how it was on the slow streets, it's vastly different. So we're talking about this idea of social infrastructure, which is building and creating systems. Some of them don't have a physical aspect, some are just a system that creates a social connection and bridges people together. So ultimately, placemaking creates these town squares. It sets in motion this kind of social infrastructure where people can come together, and there's all kinds of measurable outcomes from that are health related, that are economic related, that are life success related, and that's why it's super important to bring people together. It's also very important, as we have such a divide in the way that people look at things and how they get along with each other and to agree and disagree, to have them see that each other are real people. And that's what empathy is all about, to understand that someone else is a human and so are you, so why do you feel so differently about them? So we're also building out this, you'll see this in the tour, we're also building out a green space that's based on this design. And outside there, there's a thing called Who Are You and What Do You Want? There's also the postcard project. You can try those after the session. They're going to stay through the conference. But now we're going to do an activity. So in the middle of your, and thank you for listening.
Okay.